Hello and welcome to the Dream Architect Life with Brian Sweet and Brittany Anderson from Sweet Financial Partners. Brian and Brittany, how are you?
Wonderful and magnificent today.
Who's
Boy, I'm going
wonderful?
to have
Who's
something to
magnificent?
keep up to today.
Who's who? Wonderful, magnificent. Where we got?
I'll be magnificent.
Well, and I guess I'll be wonderful.
Mr. Wonderful, how are you?
Kevin O'Leary, here we go.
All right. I know that we are well into this series. I'm so excited. I know that you announced the book was released, right? This on the last podcast, I believe. So
Yes.
I'm really excited about that. What are we talking about today?
Today we are going to talk about probably one of our favorite topics, which I know we may or may not have said that a couple times, but for real this time, we're going to talk about dreaming bigger and then going even bigger than that and beyond.
Okay. Going big, going bigger, going beyond. That sounds very exciting. How is it possible? That's the question,
Well,
right?
yeah, that's actually a great question. And we started the last couple episodes, we spent time talking about confidence
Mhm.
and how part of building confidence is really laying the foundation of what your value system is. So when you think about dreaming and look at it cliche or not, talk about dreaming big. Okay, you hear that a lot. You hear that term quite a bit. The thing is that dreaming big, dreaming bigger, and going beyond that means so many different things to so many different people. So, without going through the exercise of really determining what your value system is, what's meaningful to you, what gives you confidence to take action in the future, it's hard to determine what your dreams are and what's meaningful to you. So, for some, dreaming big, pursuing possibility, it might mean extravagant travel and experiences and kind of touching all ends of the earth. This guy sitting next to me, if you're not watching it, he might be that kind of person. He wants every experience possible. To
Mhm.
somebody else, dreaming big might be your ideal home where your family and your grown kids and your grandkids can come and congregate and you can have that really special time and have property where you can do fun things outside together. Those are things that we hear from clients across all spectrums. So again, when we talk about dreaming big, you want to get in the mindset that you have to determine what this means to you. So Brian, I don't know if you want to add anything there, but I think this is just such a great way to frame this topic of the next couple episodes.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is in our book in chapter 9, there's a quote that starts out that I think is really kind of impactful and probably fits right here. And it goes, so many of our dreams are at first, they seem impossible. Then they seem improbable. And then when we summon the will, they become inevitable. And that was by Christopher Reeve.
Mhm.
And that's so true. But you have to start thinking and then you have to start doing for them to become inevitable.
So I want to, you drew a beautiful picture there. And I want to say something because I had a client quite a while ago that I was coaching, and I went on site to a coaching session there, traveled to their home. They invited me in. It was beautiful. And so they have a son and a daughter, and their son and the father loved to ride quads, loved it. Well, the daughter was into horses. And so they had a beautiful property in Brittany. This is what triggered it really when you were talking about the property. They had a track outside their house that was oval, but it was very large. The daughter could run her horses on it, and on the outside of that track, they had built some hills, and the son could do his quads all in the same location, all in the same thing. But he would get a backhoe and he'd build the little ramps for the son and all that. So they actually kind of transformed that dream into a reality all in one set because they had the room and the ability to do so. And when you said property, that's the first thing I thought of. They fulfilled both of those kids' dreams in the same spot, which I thought was just a beautiful thing.
That is so neat. And we love hearing examples of things like that, of people actually taking action on those things. Because I think that there's one thing that tends to happen is there's this fear of the unknown or fear of if it doesn't work out. So, use the example that you just gave with the building of the track and the creating space and all of that. All that they did was they took action.
Hmm.
They determined what was important for them as a family unit, and they took action on that. Same thing goes for the big experiences. So if you're sitting here like Mr. Sweet, who wants to go like dive in a cage with crazy killer sharks, which I'm like, I'll stay on land and I'll cheer for you. But, it doesn't matter. What matters is that people actually take action and move through the fear or the uncertainties of the what ifs. You could, and again, I love the example you gave because I think it's so down to earth that, you would get a lot of people that would say, someday it would be nice if we did that.
Mhm.
Someday it would be great if we use that part of the land for this, but without taking action, actually moving forward, that's where people stalemate and they don't pursue possibility and they don't dream beyond what's immediately in front of them. So, yeah, I think that's just such a great example. It actually makes me think of, I saw this, I call it a meme or quote or whatever, recently. And it said that, here, let me make sure I find it so I say it correctly, that God didn't give you a shovel for you to just hope it digs. You have to work for it. So whatever your beliefs are,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where without action, anything we've talked about up to this point in the podcast, none of it really matters if you're not taking action towards something meaningful.
Mhm.
If you're just sitting there and hoping and wishing that, maybe somebody will come along and that'll be the secret key, is somebody will, give you the key to unlock possibility for your future. That's just not reality. There's great
Mhm.
people that can be in your corner to be an accountability partner, but they're not going to do it for you. They can't do it for you. You have to be the one to actually move forward on it.
Yeah. What struck me was that I've never seen that before. And I think that that's something you guys have taught throughout this entire process is when you dream big and dream bigger and dream beyond, there's going to be a lot of dreams that you've never seen come to fruition for anyone before. I've never seen a quad and horse track combined, right? But they had this vision and they built it. And I think that that's where a lot of people have that fear, like you were talking about, Brittany. I don't know what the end result's going to be, so I don't know if I want to take that step forward. But that's what true dreaming is, and taking that step and going beyond, create something that nobody's ever seen before. That's when true genius happens, in my opinion.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah. And the nice thing about one dreaming, first of all, the doing's a separate thing, but actually dreaming is free.
Mhm.
Doesn't take any cost, time. Well, maybe take a little time for you to come up with your thoughts. But an interesting thing happens when you actually spend time dreaming about what your ideal future might look like. And there's this really unique thing that happens when you start thinking about things that you want, you desire, you'd love to have in your future. Your mind actually goes out and starts looking for those things. So, whatever's top of mind is what your brain looks for. It doesn't know if it's good stuff, bad stuff, but whatever you put in front of it, it's going to find whatever you're thinking about. So if you think about your dreams or if you think about positive things, you'll be kind of surprised how those things just start popping up.
Mhm.
As we've mentioned, before, this reticular activating system, that really works. So if you make a mindful presence to think about or have every day, maybe in the mornings before you get busy, have some thinking or dreaming time, and then put that front of mind, that'll carry forward the whole day. And maybe before you go to bed, do the same thing. And you will just be shocked how some of the things that you thought were impossible, things start popping up that were relating to that. And then once you see those, then take the action to move it forward, and then it'll become reality.
Bryan, I'm going to say something that is kind of like that, but could be a really stupid example. And you can tell me it is. So I bought my.
Normally I give the, goofy example. So,
Well, recently we had to purchase a car for my wife, and we looked at a bunch of different kinds. And so we settled on, we found a Subaru. Great little car, good gas mileage, exactly what you wanted, all wheel drive, the whole 9 yards. Love it. We've never owned a Subaru before. But now, guess what?
you
I see
see
Subarus everywhere.
hundreds of them.
I see Subarus everywhere. And I think that that's what you're kind of speaking of. I think anybody who's purchased a car that they didn't own before, all of a sudden they see them everywhere. And so when you say, think about your dream, think about what you're hoping for, and all of a sudden you're going to see these opportunities pop forward because it's top of mind, that's what I look at. I think, man, that is spot on, because if you're not thinking about it, if you haven't owned that Subaru before, you don't even pay attention. But now that you're actively thinking about it and putting that top of mind, that's when you really see things.
Yeah, great example.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
No stupidity here.
Oh, thanks.
No, I think that's a perfect example because everybody can relate to that same thing. I mean, same thing goes for I'm, as a woman, I like to shop for certain shoes. And if I have this like pair, I'll see a pair of red heels on a woman. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Everybody's wearing red heels. It's like, no, because I want to find the perfect pair. So, I mean, there's so many different analogies that people can use that are just proof that when you turn your brain onto something big or small,
Mhm.
that's what it's searching for. And I think there's an even maybe bigger underlying theme here too, that I think we can all think of people in our life where life seems to continually happen to them. They're maybe in the victim mindset or in that
Mhm.
constant state of self-pity or self-loathing or whatever that looks like. But it's because they're looking for evidence that life is happening to them. They're looking for evidence that
Absolutely.
bad things constantly happen to them. So instead of going into that frame of mind where it's kind of like the waterfall of, oh, what else? Okay, what else can hit me? What else is coming after me this week, this month, this year, whatever? Shifting our mindset to look for possibility and look for the
Mm.
good in things and look for opportunities to actually create the possibility for your future. So, again, if you're sitting here and you're fast approaching retirement and it's feeling overwhelming because again, we've talked about that whole sense of identity that can get tied to a lifelong career
Mhm.
and, knowing exactly what you're waking up to every day. If you are not clear and intentional on what possibility means to you, on what it looks like to you, and what a truly fulfilling life means, it's a pretty good chance that life is going to just happen to you. That you're just going to go through the motions and you're not going to realize the things that could actually add massive value to yourself, to your loved ones, and to your future as a whole. So it's one of those things where if you don't put into the universe what it is that you actually want to get out of it, it's hard for it to conspire and work in your favor. And a lot of times it's just because you're not clear.
Yeah. And sometimes what you need to do is you'll have to get a little uncomfortable for your dreams to come true
Mm.
because you're going to have to do something different that you're not accustomed to. And when you are feeling uncomfortable, I would look at that as probably a really good sign because it's pushing the envelope probably in a direction that you need to go. And a lot of times people don't take action because the easiest path is the one with least resistance. And that's just to do what I've always done. But for you to get to the level of if you truly want your life to be better, if you truly want your dreams to come true, then do those things that push you out of your comfort zone because that's a good sign. So don't look at that as, oh, gee, I'm not feeling normal or that's feeling kind of weird. That's how you're supposed to feel because it's pushing you to another level, which is going to ultimately make everything in your life much more positive.
Hey, it's Brittany here for a little tiny interruption. Bryan and I have some really exciting news, and that is that our newest book, Dream Architecture, is officially launched. It is live. We have been working for a really long time to bring you quality content. This is all centered around really similar topics to what we talk about on the podcast here, but we're going even deeper. We're looking at where money and mindset meet so that you can focus on a life filled with possibility, a life filled with abundance, and one that creates true fulfillment for your future. So be sure to grab a copy. You can download it if you've got a reader, if you've got a Kindle. You can get your physical copy. Go to Amazon.com and look up Dream Architecture by yours truly, Brittany Anderson, and the wonderful Mr. Bryan Sweet. We look forward to hearing your commentary and your feedback and really hope this can help you continue your focus on possibility. Now we'll get right back into the episode.
Well, I think you've said this before on the podcast, or at least we've talked about it, is that right there is a muscle, right? You have to
Mhm.
exercise that muscle. And just
Yeah.
like any exercise, you're going to get sore at first, or it's going to feel a little tight at first. It's uncomfortable, like you said. And I think if you, and I'll be honest, there's been times where I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna hit that treadmill. And I do that for about 3 days. Like that fourth day, I'm like, oh, darn it. No, I'm going to take a
And
couple day
then you
break.
literally just hit it. Yeah.
Right? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that it's just something that you have to push through. So I think that I love that analogy and that example that you gave.
Yeah. And, I think back actually as Brian was talking and as we've talked so many times about looking for the good, being intentional, all of that, I think back to a period in my life, my divorce. How many years ago? Gosh, it's been 12 years ago, something like that, 11 years ago. And I think about this pivotal moment in my life where I was sitting there going, okay, my life would be okay if I just sit in this situation, if I
Mm,
don't make a big change for my future. But as I started looking around and really deciding like where I wanted my life to go and how I wanted my career to look and what my ideal relationship would look like and where I'd want to potentially raise future kids and how that would look. I mean, I basically had to make this very conscious choice that I was either willing to settle for something slightly less than even mediocre and just coast and have it be okay.
mhm,
Or I could step into something completely terrifying, make a massive decision, uproot kind of everything that I knew up to that point, and risk, maybe things won't be any better, but maybe they'll be wonderful. And I'll tell you that that was one of the most painful things I ever went through, even though it was my choice. One of the most painful things I ever went through, but honestly, one of the best decisions because I can attribute looking for opportunity and looking for possibility when I came out of the mud, when I came out of the doom and gloom and what
mhm.
was a really kind of terrible relationship, it was like the clouds lifted and possibility was popping up everywhere because I understood at that point that there was better on the other side. And I'm not sitting here saying that people should start reassessing their lives and looking for divorce and massive change like that. But sometimes it takes making a big, gigantic leap of faith into your future and betting on yourself, saying, I know what I am capable of, and I know what I am worthy of and making those choices for you. And sometimes it takes a little bit of a selfish move, or it takes moving through massive fear and just knowing that, hey, my worst case scenario is things aren't any better off. And in a best case scenario, my life is going to literally be one that I wake up to every day full of excitement, full of energy, and just ready for the what's next. So I'm sure that each of you could think of things in your own life where you made this major leap through fear and what it's done for you and done for your future.
Yeah, I think Brittany, kudos for that whole thing. But I think the point of what Brittany's saying is when you do dreams or you make big changes like that, make sure they're for you
Mm-hmm.
and they're not somebody else's dreams
Mm,
or somebody else's wishes. Because if they're yours, much more likely you're going to take the action to get to what you want versus what somebody else wants. Plus, when you're doing something that's going to be uncomfortable to get there, then the benefit is going to be what you want the benefit to be because it's yours and not somebody else's wishes.
yeah. Before we move on much further than that, Brittany, I'd love to ask you a question about that scenario if you're okay with it.
Yeah, sure.
You've spoken about that before and having to make that decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
To go through the divorce. But I don't know if we've spoken about when you were going through it. What did you tell yourself, or how did you keep yourself moving forward through that? Because that was the mud that you were kind of talking about, having to go through it, feeling the judgment of other people, so on and so forth. Everything that somebody who's going through that scenario
Mm-hmm.
goes through. How did you keep going and find some of that light at the end of the tunnel? Because that's tough.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's not just one day at a time, it's 1 hour,
Mm,
1 minute. I mean, you really have to, anytime you're moving through something difficult, and especially when like your soul is telling you that on the other side of it, there are really good things ahead.
mm,
But just being able to move 1 centimeter, 1 millimeter forward at a time and giving yourself the grace to just kind of feel through the mud and have really, really sad, bad days, but know that that's just a moment and that's not life. So for me, and again, like to give a little bit more context here, when I was sitting there getting very intentional, and actually it was an exercise I went through here at Sweet Financial, looking at like, what are our top 3 dreams and what are some big goals for the future? And it was this team exercise. I started writing these things down, and it was like down in my gut, I knew that it would be really hard to accomplish those things in the situation that I was in. So it kind of goes back and ties back to, making sure you have the right people in your corner. I mean, Brian and I talk about this all the time, but it's because each of us have in some capacity, like living proof of how that can stifle and stunt your growth by having the wrong people in your corner. So again, with this theme of the dreaming big and having aspirations, you don't want anybody to tell you that your dreams are stupid or silly or unrealistic or not powerful enough or too powerful, is what I kind of dealt with,
Mm-hmm.
where it was like, oh, Brittany, you're just a dreamer. You need to come back down to earth. And it's like, well, I don't think so. I don't think I need to come back down to earth. I think I need to pursue this because there's something to be said about it. But yeah, I think it's letting yourself just be in the moment, letting yourself be in the muddy times, moving through fear and not standing still. Because once you stand still, that's where things really slow down. And that's where you start talking yourself out of pursuing what you want most. And that's where it gets, not as fun.
Yeah. Well, Bryan, you made a great point that this is something you have to do for yourself, right? You have to put yourself first in these dreams because you're the one with that dream, right? And that, I think that comes down to you believing or knowing your own value, right? Compared to, well, their ideas are more valuable than mine. Their thoughts are more valuable than mine. Their experience is more valuable than mine. And I think we talk ourselves out of a lot of things because someone with way more experience, well, maybe their experience is more valuable in their scenario, but not to your dream, right?
Correct. 100%. Yeah. And when you think about something that you desire, I can personally relate to it not maybe seeming possible, or like, what's the first step that I need to take? And the first thing is just start talking about it. And pretty soon, and then if you actually start recording some of your thoughts as you're talking about what you want to accomplish. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by that is, something that I've personally done that maybe before I started really living all the things that we talk about on the podcast, I would have said, there is absolutely no way in God's green earth that I would ever do this. But this has become something that I just take for granted now. So for years and years, I would go to these conferences and I would chat with another gentleman about how some of the meetings, maybe half of the meetings, were not really applicable and they could improve. And then we'd kind of joke, well, gee, maybe someday we should create a conference for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we'd meet again next year and we'd say the same thing. Maybe there's 60% of the material that's really not worth the time to go to. And then we'd look at each other and go, one day we should probably, create one of these conferences so everything is like, what we really need. So we kept talking about that, as I mentioned earlier. And then pretty soon we got to the point where we were probably frustrated enough with the things we were seeing that we said, all right, let's create one. What's the worst case scenario that we could do if we tried to make one ourselves? No one show up and, that's kind of the worst case. So we thought, well, it's worth it. Well, come to find out, and we've talked about it because you were one of our sponsors and great people to be there, is Randy and I created this ultimate conference platform called the Elite Wealth Advisor Symposium, which is a lot of the top 1 or 2% of all financial advisors in the country come to an event that we sponsor to learn how to improve their practice and make their life so they can go above and beyond where they're currently at.
Mm-hmm.
And we've just had such amazing reception. Literally, we sell this out, almost immediately after the conference is done. We have amazing sponsors. And I would have never told you that who would come to something Bryan created that would benefit other really successful financial advisors. But we dreamed it, we talked about it, and then we took action. Now it's a national platform.
Yeah. And the worst that could happen is it would be you and Randy with amazing food, a pool, a wonderful hotel.
Yeah, We gained 84 pounds because we had to eat everybody else's lunches. Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. Is there anything else we want to cover in this podcast? I know that we've got a couple left here in this series, and it's been fantastic, but I don't want to leave this podcast without it being you give everything, or at
Yeah.
least for this one.
Yeah, no, I think Eric, I think we covered some really great stuff today, but I think just going into the theme of, understanding what you want, realizing that it's possible, and aligning yourself with great people. I know that's been a theme we've been really hashing out here, but it's like one of those things. They talk about how bathing is a necessity. You have to do it daily. So is feeding your mind with the right kind of stuff and the positive energy and the positive mindset. And again, it goes back to intentionality. I know we talk about that word a lot. But yeah, next episode, I think we're going to dive a little bit deeper into really understanding what your value is and how to determine that. So I am looking forward to that one.
Me too. Bryan, any closing thoughts from you?
No, I'm just excited to continue this discussion in the next episode. And so look forward to talking to everybody else soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys so much for your time. And of course, our last thank you goes to the listening audience. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Dream Architect Live podcast with Bryan Sweet and Brittany Anderson. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Bryan and Brittany come out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. And we humbly ask that you share this podcast, rate it, and leave a review, as this does help other people find the show. Again, thanks for listening today. For everyone at Sweet Financial Partners, this is Eric Johnson reminding you that possibility comes to those who create it. And we'll see you next time.